The jazz band played softly in the background, casting a warm glow over the elegant restaurant tucked away on a quiet Manhattan street. The clink of glasses, gentle laughter, and hum of conversation filled the air. At a corner table, a man sat, with his collar slightly open, a half-empty glass of whiskey in front of him. Ethan Blake looked out of place, not because he didn't belong in luxury, but because his spirit clearly didn't. Once the darling of the tech world, Ethan was a millionaire many times over. He had built his company from a dorm room idea into an empire, but tonight none of that mattered. His sharp eyes, usually filled with intensity and drive, were dulled by something heavier. Betrayal had left a crack in him that no amount of wealth could patch. Across the table, 3 of his old college friends tried to lift the mood. They'd known Ethan when he was still just a dreamer with a laptop and a wild idea. Now they joked about dating apps, celebrity breakups, and everything else that might distract him. Then, as if out of nowhere, Ethan swirled the whiskey in his glass and said, "I'm going to marry the first girl who walks through that door." The others laughed, thinking it was just another dry remark. But something in his voice made the laughter slow, then stop. He wasn't smiling. "You're serious?" one of them asked, eyebrows raised. Ethan didn't look at them. "I've had enough of love games. If fate wants to send someone real, she knows where to find me." They exchanged nervous glances. Everyone knew what he'd been through. The engagement broken, the trust shattered, the headlines merciless. Ethan had become the man who had everything but peace. The restaurant's warmth contrasted with the chill that hung around him. The door didn't open immediately. For a long moment it just sat there, heavy and unmoving, like the silence in Ethan's life. The band moved into a slow, melancholic tune, as if echoing his mood. He wasn't expecting a movie moment. He wasn't even sure he believed in second chances. But deep inside, maybe he was hoping, just hoping, that the universe still had a surprise left for him. And then, as if on cue, the door creaked open. A gust of wind slipped in, along with something Ethan never saw coming. A soft hush fell over the restaurant as the door creaked open. Conversations paused. Even the jazz band seemed to quiet, as if the moment asked for silence. Every head subtly turned toward the entrance, including Ethan's. He didn't know what he expected. Maybe some elegant woman in red, someone bold, someone beautiful in the obvious way. But that wasn't who walked in. Instead, a young woman stepped through the doorway, her coat damp and threadbare, clinging to her shoulders like it had weathered too many storms. In her hand was the tiny fist of a little boy, no more than 5. His shoes squeaked slightly with each step, and his wide eyes scanned the room with curiosity and caution. The woman's eyes met the maitre d's, apologetic and cautious. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but clear. "I'm sorry. We're just here to get warm. We'll leave if it's a problem." Her words lingered in the air, simple and unassuming, yet powerful in their honesty. She didn't ask for anything, more than a bit of warmth, a chance to catch her breath from whatever life had thrown at her outside those golden doors. The maitre d' paused, clearly unsure. This was not the usual clientele. He glanced at her coat, the boy's scuffed backpack, then over to the full dining room, calculating something invisible and cold. But before he could speak, Ethan stood up. His chair scraped softly against the floor. His friends turned toward him, confused. He didn't hesitate. Something had shifted in him the moment he saw her. Something quiet, something unfamiliar, something real. He walked slowly toward the entrance, every step peeling back a layer of cynicism. "She's with me," Ethan said simply. The maitre d' looked surprised, almost doubtful, but nodded quickly, stepping aside. The woman blinked, unsure whether she had heard him right. Ethan offered a faint smile. "Come. You're the first one through the door." She hesitated, unsure of his intent, but something in his voice, steady, gentle, told her she could trust it, at least for tonight. And so, without another word, she followed him, holding tightly to her son's hand. An extra chair had been pulled up to Ethan's elegant corner table, an unlikely sight in a place where reservations were made weeks in advance, and every plate came with its own poetry of flavors. The young woman sat carefully, almost apologetically, helping her little boy into the seat beside her. He looked up at the folded napkin and polished silverware like they were treasures from another world. Ethan watched them quietly for a moment, then gestured for the waiter. "Anything they want," he said. The staff, still puzzled, obeyed without a word. "You're the first one through the door," Ethan said, his voice a mix of irony and something softer. He tried to smile. "And I meant what I said." She looked at him, unsure. "You don't have to do this." "I know," he replied, "but maybe I want to." As dinner began, the initial awkwardness faded. The boy giggled at the sparkling water bubbles. The woman, Lena, relaxed just enough to let her shoulders drop. She spoke with clarity and thoughtfulness, not to impress, but because that's how she was built. Over plates of food neither of them had expected to eat that night, Ethan learned her story. A former teacher, Lena had once led classrooms with passion and hope. But when her husband died unexpectedly 2 years ago, everything unraveled. Income, home, the future they'd built. She had no family nearby, no safety net, and no time to grieve with a child to raise. She didn't complain. She didn't dwell on her losses. She never once asked for help. Instead, she spoke with quiet strength about the job she'd applied, for the shelters they'd stayed in, how her son still asked when Daddy was coming home. Ethan listened, really listened, more than he had to anyone in years. The noise in his mind, money, status, betrayal, headlines, fell away. All that was left was this moment, this woman, this child smiling at a plate of French fries like it was the best gift in the world. Lena was not polished or wealthy or what the world would expect for a man like Ethan. But she was real, gracious, dignified. And sitting across from her, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Human. As dessert arrived and laughter returned to the table, no one else in the restaurant noticed that something incredible had just happened. But Ethan knew. So did Lena. Outside the restaurant, the world had turned quiet. Snow began to fall in slow, lazy flakes, softening the noise of the city. Lena helped her son into his thin jacket, tugging the zipper all the way to his chin. She looked up at Ethan with a small, grateful smile, the kind that carried more strength than sorrow. "We should go," she said gently. "Thank you for everything. This was more than we ever expected." Ethan stood beside her, hands buried in his coat pockets. For a moment, he just looked at her. Not the way a man looks at someone he pities, but the way a man sees someone he admires and doesn't want to lose to the cold night. "Lena," he said, his voice quieter than before, almost uncertain. "Let me help you. I don't mean just tonight. I mean, maybe I was meant to." Meet you. She froze, one hand resting lightly on her son's shoulder. Her eyes met his, wide and stunned. But what touched her wasn't the offer. It was the tone. There was no pride in it, no savior complex, just sincerity. "I'm not asking for anything," she whispered, emotion catching in her throat. "I don't want charity." "I know," Ethan replied. "That's not what this is. I don't know what it is yet. I just know that when you walked through that door, everything changed." Tears welled in Lena's eyes, not because he was rich or generous, but because he saw her, really saw her, not as someone broken or needy, but as someone worthy, as someone strong. Her son reached up and held Ethan's hand, unprompted. It was a small gesture, but it made something shift deep inside Ethan's chest. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something more than success. He felt purpose. He had spent so long chasing things that filled his bank account but left his heart empty. Now, in the falling snow beside a woman with nothing but dignity and a child with wide, trusting eyes, he felt full, not of answers, but of hope. And for the first time in a very long while, that was enough. "You said—" The sun filtered softly through the trees, casting golden patches across the grass of the quiet park. Laughter echoed from the path as a small boy wobbled joyfully on a donated bicycle, his legs pedaling fast, his confidence growing with every turn of the wheels. Ethan and Lena sat on a weathered bench nearby, their shoulders brushing, saying little. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of everything they'd lived through, separately and now together. A simple ring sparkled on Lena's finger as she turned it gently, almost absent-mindedly. It wasn't large or flashy, but it held meaning far deeper than diamonds. It was a promise born not out of convenience or fantasy, but truth, kindness, mutual healing. Ethan watched the boy with a soft smile, then turned to Lena. "He's getting good," he said. She nodded. "He says he wants to be a race car driver now. Last week it was a firefighter." They both chuckled, the kind of laugh that comes from people who know what it means to have almost lost joy, and then found it again in unexpected places. Months had passed since that snowy night at the restaurant, but neither had forgotten. Ethan didn't just offer Lena and her son shelter, he offered respect, a seat at the table, a future. And in return, she gave him something no amount of money had ever been able to buy: a reason to live with heart. The world full of scripted romances and fairy tales didn't need another glossy love story. What it needed was this: a quiet reminder that sometimes the right people walk into our lives not dressed in perfection, but wrapped in truth and need. And that love, real love, begins not when we expect it, but when we're finally open enough to give without condition. Ethan reached for Lena's hand. She took it without a word. As her son rode past them again, beaming with freedom and joy, Ethan looked up at the sky, clear, endless, and full of light. Sometimes what we're searching for doesn't come wrapped in answers. It comes in a moment, a gesture, a stranger stepping through a door,